All right, if you remember yesterday, we went over this. I'm not going to go over this again, but we went over this 23-page thing from Zetcode.com, which was an introduction to object-oriented programming, and then we went through Chapter 9 in our book. All right. One of the things, I gave you these 4 handouts yesterday, and one of these handouts is 5 pages long, but it's on properties. All right. And the reason I'm bringing that up to you is I'd like you, when you get the time, to just take a look at that. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's in here today. All right. And the plan is, just so you know, today we're going to go through an example, a fairly detailed example, where we're going to create a class. All right, and then we're going to take it, we're going to kind of rip it apart so you can see another way of doing it. And then the rest of the period will be lab. All right, tomorrow we're going to go over 2 different problems that you'll be assigned from Chapter 9. All right, I decided, looking at it, I'm going to assign 3 problems. 2 of them we'll do as a class. All right. Then on Friday, and I've started to write you an email with this, but I don't have it finished yet. But on Friday, we'll have the written test. The rest of the period will be lab. Then next Monday, you'll have your next hands-on test on Chapter 9. All right. Now, it's not a big thing, but I just want to mention to you, I've said this before, that 2 weeks from Friday, which is March 8th, the plan is right now that Lewis and Clark students are going to be here. They'll be here for the entire period. So we will be building something as a class. I don't know. Thorne hasn't gotten back to me yet, so I don't know what they're studying this semester. Because usually he tells me what they're studying and what he'd like to see covered. But like I said, I've emailed him twice and he hasn't gotten back to me. So as soon as he lets me know, I'll let you know. But I'll give you this by the end of class, where I'm going through everything until we break. The plan is, by the time we break, we'll be through Chapter 11. All right? And then when you get back from the break, we're going to have to spend either the next week or the next 2 weeks going over 12, 13, and 14. All right? Then we'll be done with this book, and we'll be moving right into the land of database. All right. So with that said, what I'd like you to do is, if you probably are not in there right now, but I'd like you to get into Visual Studio. All right, so start up a new session of Visual Studio. Once it comes up like this, we're going to come in and we're going to do a new project. It is going to be a console app for the .NET framework. All right, we're going to call the name of the project Person, with a big P, Person01, and we're going to call this, the name of the solution, OOP Demo 01. Can everybody read that okay? All right, so go in, get into Visual Studio, start up a new project. It'll be a console app, .NET framework. The name of it will be Person01, and the solution will be OOP Demo 01. All right. After you've done all that, then just click OK, and that should start the ball rolling, so to speak. I'm going to show you how to do this. And then we're going to take it and I'm going to show you a, quote, better way, unquote, of doing this. But you're all smart people in here, so you all realize that even though I'm showing you how to do something, A, that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. B, it doesn't mean there's not a better way to do it. All right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to introduce this to you in a way that I feel is as intuitive as possible. Does that make sense? Because this is not easy stuff. All right? Mr. Corrigan came in the office yesterday and he said, anything wrong? And I said, no, it's probably picked the wrong day to start going over a brand new topic, right after they had a few days off. And he said, why? And I saw the look on their face, and he just laughed. He said, yeah, I kind of went through the same thing today. All right, so hopefully today when you see it in action, it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay? So if you look right here, this is the namespace. All right? That namespace, as you can see, that namespace is the same thing that we have up here as far as the name of our project. Okay? And right underneath it now, we've got only this file that says program.cs. We could run this and nothing would happen, correct? There's no code in there. So what we're going to do is right underneath, and we could do it above it or below it doesn't matter, but right underneath where we've got class program, we're going to hit enter a couple times, and like I said, right underneath there, we're going to create another class. All right? And that class we're going to create is going to be called person. So we're just going to type in here class person. Get used to, when you put these names in here like this, get used to capitalizing, okay? And if you do run words together, so for instance, if it was like tax rate, it would be a capital T and a capital R. Does that make sense to everyone? But when you're working with this stuff, when you're working with classes like this, it just should all be capitalized. All right. Now, we're going to do this in some ways at least. It's probably going to be like, okay, you just showed us this, and now you told us this. Sort of as, yeah, it's going to look almost like it's disjointed, or it's like, why are you showing it to us in this order? There's a reason for that, and we'll go over it as we go over it. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put a comment up here, and I'm going to say declare instance variables. Sometimes, some of you ask, do I have to write the comments? No. We're going to have to turn this in? No. This is designed to help you so that on Monday when you're doing your own test and you're creating your own class, what you'll be doing hopefully will make sense. All right? Yes. I have never heard that before. I wish I knew what to tell you. I would Google the error to begin with. All right? And then I would make sure when you did it that you were in the .NET framework and not in Core. Okay, I'm not saying you were, but, like I said, never having heard that before. Now, my question for you is, do people have at least somewhat of an understanding of what instance variables are? We are going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instance variables. We're going to suppose that each person has a first name, a last name, a social security number, a height, a weight, an eye color, a hair color, and a gender. All right? Yes. I'm not going to make them all strings. All right? The height and weight are going to be ints, and the gender is going to be a char, just so we get used to working with different data types in here. We could make them all strings and convert them later. I'm not doing that. All right?
But the data we're manipulating through the methods, right?
We will be manipulating the data through the methods. And then we will come back up here, and here's where we will instantiate or create our person objects. All right? And I'm going to show you something that I glossed over because it was at the end yesterday. All right? But we're going to sit there, and when we do our write line, something's going to happen that's not happened before. All right? And don't let that worry you, because you're going to have all the code. If I'm going too fast, or if something doesn't make sense, you have to stop and ask me. I'd rather have 100 questions than no questions and have people who are like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to create 3 strings. First one, and again, yeah, we could call them other things. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a first name and a last name and a social security number. And I'm just going to call that SSN. I think that's enough where I think people get what an SSN is. So those are all of our instance variables right there. All right. Now, a couple things about these, just so you know this. What we're going to end up doing is we are going to end up doing some validation on the height and the weight. And that's going to be it. What you have to start thinking about here, I know this may or may not make a lot of sense to you right now, but suppose that you were doing this now for a living. You're all professional C# programmers. All right. There's a pretty good chance you'll have to do no data validation whatsoever, because there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to be grabbing this information out of a database. And before it was put into the database, somebody already validated it. Does that make sense to people? But we're just going to assume, just so you get a little practice and so you can see how to validate a couple fields. I mean, I could validate first name and last name to make sure there was something there. I could make sure they were alphabetic. You know, for social security number, I could make sure it was number, dash, number, dash, number, you know, etc. We could do all that stuff. I chose not to. All right? And the same kind of thing for eye color. You know, we could have had a listing of eye colors. All right, I know that they have different color contacts right now, so your eyes can actually be a different color, but probably there's a limited number of eye colors. All right, same thing with hair colors, except, you know, I see people on TV all the time with hair colors I would never think would exist as a hair color. All right, the other thing too is, you know, and I remember my brother saying this. It's funny, I've got 3 brothers, and 2 of them have my hairline, or I have their hairline. All right. The other one has got more hair than most women do. All right. But the point is, the old joke we always used is, if you're bald, what does it say on your driver's license for hair color? You know what I'm saying? Because you could put anything down and nobody'd know anyway. But what I'm telling you is, we're not even going to worry about that. Also, for gender, we're just going to say M and F. I know in our politically correct world, there are other things that can be used right now. All right. A guy that I used to work with, he lives in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin's not a progressive state, but Madison is about as progressive as it gets. He sent me this thing. It was a while back. I wish I'd have saved it, because it was some kind of a form. And for gender, they had 18 different designations. And he even said, I don't know what 3/4 of these things even mean. I've never heard of them before. He said, why don't they just make it male, female, and other? You know, but there was a bunch of stuff that we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to suppose it's M or F. All right? That's just the way that we're going to handle it. Now, if you look up on the screen here, what I want you to realize is, since these were declared as instance variables, before we've done anything, what C# does automatically is it took all those strings and it set them to the to the empty string. So it's as though we said string F name equals double quote, string L name equals double quote, string SSN equal double quote. It set those 2 numeric fields to 0. It set these strings for eye color and hair color to the empty string, and it set gender. You can't use an empty string with a char. You can't use, single quote, but you can say single quote space, single quote, and I think that's what it does. All right, I could be wrong. I don't think I am. All right. Now, as we run through this, again, we're going to be manipulating this again and again as we go through it. I just want you to know that. But what I want to show you right now, for what we're going to do right now, all right, we could come through here and just do this. So what I'm saying right here is these all, even though they're instance variables, they're for us basically, they're all properties. They're a property of a person. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our property setters and getters. And I'm going to show you how to do it both the long way and the short way. All right? Yes. No, they'll be fine. Just you'll see why in just a minute. Okay. All right. The question was, and it was a good question that was just asked here by Christian. If you're going to be doing these setters and getters, do you want to make those public or private or whatever? No, but we're going to take the setters and getters. We're actually going to make those public. All right. So if we wanted to, now I'm going to put this down, but I'm going to comment this whole thing. Because I want to show you the long way just once. You don't have to type this in. But I just want to show you this. So this is the long way of doing it. So I'm going to show you just the first name, a property setter, and getter. And I'm just going to call this the long way. That's not an official term or anything like that. It's just what I decided to call it. So we could come in here and we could say public string fname. All right. Just like that, public string fname. Oops, well, that was great. In fact, I'll tab this out a little bit so you can see. And we could come in here and say get. Return fname. Set fname equal value. Oh, I got 3 of these there, but I did. All right, now a couple things about this as you look at it. All right, first thing, this is where we're making it public. These are methods. That's why we're making them public. They are going to allow us to directly work with these. All right, you could make a case, and you're right, Christian, that we should have made those private. That may have been a better thing to do. But I'm just showing you, you don't have to. All right. All right, they will default. I'm not sure if they default to private or internal. It's one or the other, but it'll work fine the way it is. Now, the reason that this is the long way, all right, is let me put down this so you can see the difference. So these will be our property setters and getters, and this will be the short way. This you can all start typing in. All right, so we're going to say public. Now, just so you see this, it's going to be public string fname. Now, I know you're probably typing. I wouldn't type if I were you, and I'm going to show you why right in just a second. Get set. All right, and that actually is totally valid. That's fine. That's the way we're going to do these. But this is what I tried showing you yesterday, and I kept screwing it up. I think this is going to work now. If you type in the word prop, just like that, and you hit tab twice. Tab, tab. See what it does for you? It's a code thing. And then you can come in here and double click in here, change that to string. Then tab over again, move over to here, and change that to fname. Now, if it's faster for you to not type in the word prop and hit tab twice and change them, then just type them. But what I'm trying to show you is a code completion feature that exists in Visual Studio for you to use with object-oriented programming. If you go, screw it, I don't want to use it, then don't use it. But again, it's the word prop, and you can see that it sees it right there, and then tab, tab. So you can do it either way. Move this up. What it does is what's built into the language is as soon as you put the same name in, but that first letter is capitalized, then it associates that property with what was defined as the instance variable above. I think that's what you're asking? Okay. All right, so that's all of them. And again, doing it this way and doing it this way are the same thing. All right? Most people tend to do it the short way just because it's less typing. All right? Yes?
Why are you making them different than the variables?
Because you cannot directly, the way that this is set up, run get and set on these. You run it on the properties that are associated with the variables. And the difference is the variables start with a lowercase letter. The properties basically are the same name except the first letter is uppercased. All right, I mean, the smart ass answer is because that's how they do it. All right, and I can't really give you a better answer than that except for the fact that that is how they do it. All right, when it's a year from now and you're in the Java class, you're going to see a lot of similarities. Java does it almost the same way, but it doesn't have restrictions like this. They don't have prop, tab, etc.
So
But it's
declare that they are the same.
you don't declare that they're the same thing. The system realizes that they're the same thing. All right. So in other words, it associates these properties with these variables. Exactly how that happens, honest to goodness, I can't tell you. It's just that's the way that it works. All right. And I mean, that's a good thing, but that's the way that it works. All right. Now, I could save this, and it's not a bad idea to save right now, and I could come back and I could run this again, but still, we have nothing in main. So nothing's going to happen. All right, but the good news is, as far as I can tell, it's not marking any of this as being wrong. I don't have any errors. So as far as I know, at least, right now, my code works. So what we've done is we've defined 7 or 8, whatever it is, instance variables. So again, I want to make sure you get this. What we're saying is every person that we create, we'll create about a half dozen of them in a few minutes. Every person has a unique first name, last name, social security number, height, weight, eye color, hair color, and gender. Does that make sense? All right, we could create 12 of them and have one for each one of you. We wanted to do that. All right, and then we created the properties that go along with these. All right, now, even if we went back right now into main, we could not create these people. We could, but it would be a cluster. It wouldn't be good. You may or may not remember from yesterday when I went over that PDF and then we looked at it in the chapter, but one of the things that we talked about was a word called a constructor. All right? And the thing about a constructor is it runs every time you create a brand new class. The constructor runs. And again, you might say that I don't know what that means. That's what we're going to be going over right now. All right, like I said, I'm trying to do this even though it's a little almost ass backwards. All right, I'm trying to do it so it hopefully makes some sense to you as we go through it. This will be very reminiscent of what you're going to end up doing in your test next week. That's why I'm saying, and I appreciate the questions. If you have them, keep them coming. There may be questions that you ask, and I'll just tell you, I don't know why they do it that way. Or they do it that way because they do it that way. All right? All right. So what I want to do is before I even do any of this stuff, before this, I want to write that special method. In fact, I'm going to write it more than once. That's called my constructor. The constructor, again, is what's going to be called, look on the screen, please. I'm going to write 3 constructors right here. Those constructors are what are going to be called when I create a new person object up here. All right? Just so you know that. All right. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to have 3 of them. So the first one, I'm just going to put a message here or a comment, constructor number 1, and it's called a no-arg constructor. That's literally what it's referred to. And what that means is there's nothing in the parentheses. Nothing. So when we create a new person object, all right, this is the one that's going to be called if we say something like this. If we were to come in here and say person Jeff equals new person, and we put nothing in there, this is the one that's going to be called. All right? So we're going to have to add some more stuff in just a couple minutes. Let's worry about that when we have to worry about it. All right? So I'm going to just write the thing for the constructor here. So when you write it, constructors are always public, and they're the same name as the name of the class. The name of the class is person, so the name of the constructor will be person. Since that does not have any parameters in it, that's it. Now we're going to put a couple lines of code in there in a couple minutes. But what I want you to understand is this is the constructor that is going to be called when we create a new person and pass nothing in. All right? So we're going to add some stuff in there in just a minute. But that's the first one. Then the second one, we're going to make another constructor. So it'll be constructor number 2. First name and last name only. All right, that's all that we're going to know. All right, public person again. And we're going to pass in here a string that's going to hold the first name and a string that's going to hold the last name. Okay? Could we have called those two things F name and L name? Could we have, for these names right here and right here, could we have used these names? The answer is yes. But then, when we put our code in here, we'd have to say this dot. Okay? So I'm going to show it to you both ways in just a couple seconds. All right. So right now, we're not going to do anything more in there. But I want you to realize that's going to be like if we call this and we said person John equals new person, and let's say we said here John Smith. So in other words, when we create this person, we're going to be passing in their first name and their last name, but nothing else. All right? And then we're going to have one more constructor that we write below that. And then we're going to say all fields passed in. So what does that mean? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things are going to be passed in. All right? And what does that mean? Well, that means that this constructor is going to say public person string first name, string last name, string, I'll just call it social for social security number. All right. Int height. I'm putting it on 2 lines because I'm not sure if it'll all fit on the screen. Int weight, string eye color, string hair color, char gender. So again, this is going to be the constructor that's called, I'm not going to write this out, but if I said person Bill equals double quote William, double quote Doe, William quote, and I gave them values for all 8 things. All right? Now we still have to write code in here, but I'm showing you overloaded constructors. All right? And I'm not sure if I'm going to get an error on this. Don't write this. I'm putting an error in here on purpose. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write this. Public person string S string Y. They don't mean anything. Okay? I'm getting that squiggly now because these 2 methods, as far as C# is concerned, are exactly the same method. I didn't overload. It's string in the first one. It's string in the second one. Even though they're different names, that doesn't matter. The compiler could give a rat's butt about the names. It only cares about the types. So I get the squigglies under this one because as far as C# is concerned, I haven't overloaded the method. I have made an error. Because if I call it and I create a new person and I pass in 2 strings, the system doesn't know, do I call this one or do I call this one? It doesn't know. Once the software is confused, it's going to mark that as an error. And notice it's an error right here, which means the program will not compile. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that. I just wanted to show you that because that's an example of what we talked about in an earlier chapter, all right, when we talked about overloading methods. All right. All right. Now, up here, we had all this stuff. Okay? You see this. We have all this stuff. But, you know what I want to do is every time we come in and we create a new person, I want to have a counter that has how many people we've created. So if we create 10 people, the person counter will be 10. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right. That's not a property for everybody. That's one all the people we create is going to share. So I'm going to come down here and right up above my constructor, I'm going to say declare and initialize static variables. So this one I will make public. Public static, you'll see why later. Static int person count equals 0. Now let's talk about what's special, so to speak, about this variable. First thing, it's public, which means I can access it both in this class and in other classes. It's the first thing. You can say, yeah, but so are these. No, they're not. Second thing, it's static. That means there's only one of them. So if I create 100 people, person count is going to equal 100. I set it to 0 to begin with because when we start the program, there are no people. All right? It's an int, but notice that every time I create a person, where do I create a person? Here, here, and here. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm creating a new person here when this is called. I'm creating a new person here when this is called. I'm creating a new person here when that's called. So the first thing I want to do in all of these is I want to say plus plus person count. I want to do that 3 times. Now, is it possible to just do it once? Yeah. I could have written another method that just had plus plus person count, and I could have called that one method from all 3 places. I don't know what that buys me. But there's a lot of ways that this could all be done. All right. We're going to do a little bit more, and then we're going to take a break. All right. Now, again, one of the things I mentioned to you earlier, is, okay, right here, we're creating a brand new person, but we're not passing anything in. So how are we going to set that person's first name, their last name, their social security number, their height, their weight, their eye color, their hair color, and their gender? And there's different ways we can do this. One way, not the only way, but one way we can do this is to come up and right at the top of our class, bless you, we can come in and say declare and initialize program, or how about class constants. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make a constant, one or more, for each one of these. Okay? So we're going to come in here, we're going to say const string DEFFN for the default, oops, jeez Louise. Const string DEFFN, which it means that's going to be the default first name, equals unknown first name. Kind of a stupid name, but it's the one I'm going to use. All right. Then I'm going to have a default last name that's going to be unknown LN for last name. Then I'm going to have a default social security number. All right. And that one will, rather than unknown SSN, I'll just put in XXX-XX-XXXX. Again, if you look at what I'm doing, well, I wouldn't do it that way. Good. That's good. Then you're thinking outside of the box, so to speak, and you're thinking about how you do it. That's what I want. All right? So I've got all this stuff, but I'm going to put in like we've been doing in some of the regular homeworks and stuff we've been doing, I'm going to put in minimums and maximum for heights and weights, and then a default for the height and a default for the weight. All right? So I'm going to come in here now and say const string, not a string, I'm sorry, const int min weight, and I'm going to set that equal to, you know, the minimum weight I'm expecting somebody to be. All right? And that'll be 1. Const int max weight, and I'm going to set that equal to 777. Again, you say, I don't like your constant values. Then change them and make them your own. That's totally fine. But I'm also going to have in here a const int, and I'm going to call it def w for default weight, and I'm going to set that equal to 175. Again, those are just numbers I made up. There's nothing special about any of them. Now I want to do the same thing with the height. And the minimum height will be 12. The maximum height is going to make 96. That's 8 feet tall. That should be plenty big. All right. And for the default height, I'll make it 72. I'm not going to take the time to write comments in here for every bit of this. I did do it when I actually wrote it, but I don't want you to spend any more time watching me type than you have to. All right? Okay, then I'm going to make a couple more. I'm going to have a constant string, and I'm going to put in here just a default eye color, and I'll set that equal to blue. Again, you don't like it if you go, yeah, everybody's blue. Why? Because I have brown eyes. Then make it brown. I don't care. All right. 2 more. We'll have a constant string a default hair color, and I'm going to set that equal to brown. And finally, const char, and we'll have a default gender, and we'll set that equal to, and again, just since it's a char, it's a single character, we'll set that equal to F. So we'll suppose that the default in there is female. You think that's sexist one way or the other? Make it male, make it other. I don't really care. And I'm getting that error because that should be not double quotes, but single quotes. All right. So I have come in here and I have set some constants. And again, if you don't like my names, just use your own. All right. You know what a constant is by now. The values of these cannot change. Once they're set, it's the old adage, set it and forget it. All right? So that's what we're doing in there. So we now have these constants. Why does that matter? Because if we're going to create a brand new person in here and we're not passing anything in, we're going to set all of their stuff to the defaults. Does that make sense? So that if we don't give them a name, their name is going to be unknown FN. We don't give them for first name. We don't give them a last name, it'll be unknown LN. We don't give them a social security number, it'll be XXX, -XX, -XXXX, etc. That's just the way I decided to do it. All right? Now, don't type this. We could come in here now and just start typing. So I could say fname equals default fname. And I could do that 8 or 9 times. Don't do that. Write a method to do it, because you may end up calling that in more than one place. All right? So I'm going to call this fill person with all defaults, default values. Now, you can argue and say, my God, that's really an ugly name. And you know what? You were right. It is. But it's pretty reflective of what we're about to do. All right? So, I want to come down, and I'm going to write this way at the bottom of my program. So I'm going to write this way down at the bottom, down here. And I'm going to say here, public, void, fill all this with default values. Let me write it. So fname equals default first name, name, last name equals default last name. SSN equals default SSN. Height equals default height. Weight equals default weight. Eye color equals default eye color. Hair color equals default hair color. And finally, gender equals default gender. All right? Hopefully, when you look at this, you agree with me that, as far as I can tell at least, it all looks like it should work. Kind of ugly, but it looks like it should work. But there is absolutely no problem with this method. There's really not a problem, but I want you to look at something. This is the way I want your mindset to go. All right? So please look on the screen here. We're about to do the next one. We have now covered this, which means that now we got to do this. This one right here, this one, we're going to set the first name and the last name, but then we want to set the defaults to everything else. Does that make sense? All right, I've got one person shaking their head yes. Does that make sense? All right, well, at least now I've got a few shaking their heads. All right, so rather than call this fill person with all defaults, all right, I'm going to get the word all out of there, and I'm just going to call this fill person with default values right there. All right. And then I'm going to grab out the first name and the last name from there, and I'm going to write a new routine. And I'm going to call this public void fill names with default values. And I'm going to put those two in here. And the reason I'm going to do that is now I can go like this. And now that'll fill all of them. And you might say, who cares? Well, the reason that we care, and I'll go back to this. I realize it's kind of hard sometimes to keep up. But now I can go for my second one, and I can come in here. Now I don't have the word all in there anymore, so that's what's the error there. But now I can come in and I can say fname equals fn, lname equals ln, and now I can call this. What I'm trying to get across to you is this. We could have written this here instead of the way that I wrote it. We could have written this and taken all this stuff and put it in here, but then we would have had to repeat it ourselves. There is a famous acronym when you are working in IT, and it's called DRY. DRY means do not repeat yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is not repeat myself. So we've got this fill names with default values. If you don't like fill person, you could say fill rest with default. It doesn't matter. Yes?
Do we keep the thing up there, person or name?
Up here?
Yeah.
No, I changed it because otherwise it'd be an error. So up here I called it fill person, and what did we call it down here? Fill person with default values. All right. So up here, we're also going to have to say fill names with default values. All right. So this will fill the first two fields up with defaults. This will fill up the next 6. Here, we're passing in the first 2, and this will fill up the next 6. And again, I'm not saying, hey, does that make sense? It may make very little sense to you. But I'm writing it like this so I don't have to replicate a lot of code. And I'm not saying, again, I mentioned this to you at the beginning. I'm not saying, you know what, this is the best frickin' program that God's ever created. Because it would be a lie. But I'm trying to show it to you in a way that is showing you everything and bringing it all in here. And ideally, when we get done, you'll be able to say, you know, it makes some sense. Because I can't ask for more than that right now. But I told you this the other day. I'm going to keep saying it. And I know it's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. You don't read Chapter 9. You take the test. You fail the test. You know, you don't read that handout I gave you, that PDF, and it's time for the test, and you don't have a flippin' idea how to do anything. That ain't my problem. Sorry, it's not. Because I'm giving you the tools that I'm able to give you to solve the problem. Yes? The question was, could we have come in there and initialized them with the default values? Yes. And in essence, that's what we did. So we could have come in here, right there, and we could have initialized them right there. Now, if you're asking, could you have initialized them up here? You don't do that. That's just not the way that it works. And not only that, this works okay, but if you would have, you know, this wasn't your question, but if somebody would have come in and said, well, how about if you pass in 3 things instead of 2? Then we'd have to make some modifications to this. See what I'm saying? What I'm saying is, what if you passed in the first name, the last name, and the social security number? Then I'd have to go and modify this one. I'd probably want to take, you know, I may want to change it in a certain way is what I'm saying. All right, there's no magic to this. All right? And I wrote it in a way that was easy for me to show this to you. If you go, yeah, but it's not always going to be that way. I'm supposing it is. That's why it's very important at the get-go that I talk to the people I'm creating this for and make sure that there's no miscommunication. That's the biggest problem in IT, is you tell me what you want done. I hear one thing when you said another, so I go off on my merry way and I start working on it. Then I meet with you again in a month and you're like, what the hell are you doing? This isn't anything like I wanted. And you hear about things right now, and you may have heard these terms, you may not have, but terms like agile. And it used to be, when I was doing this stuff, we literally, our timelines were sometimes 2 years to complete a project. One big project, 2 years to complete it. Now that same one project is oftentimes broken down into 15 or 20 mini projects that are due every month. Not only that, the people you're working for, you're meeting with them typically on a weekly basis, possibly on a daily basis. They may move into the offices where you're located, or you may go over where they're located. Now with me, I was working, my last job before I got into teaching, I was working with people from Caterpillar Tractor. So they flew me out to Denver every month, and I drove the 75 miles to Fort Collins so I could meet with them. That wasn't enough. I even told that to my boss. I should have been going out there weekly with all the changes they wanted all the time. And their rationale, they couldn't afford to fly me out there every week. All right. Plus, I guess they thought I'd screw off too much because nobody'd really be watching me, and I'd be in Denver all by myself. All right. So my question to you, because we're about to take a break, is do you understand the rationale behind what we've done so far? And that is that we came in here, we created constants. That isn't new. The only thing that's kind of new in here is we didn't just make maximum and minimums, we made defaults. So if we weren't provided any information, we would have a value to put in there. All right? Then we created our instance variables. Again, this is new. So every person has these 8 qualities. And if you say, well, you left out whatever, that person doesn't have it. When you create an object, the only properties that the object has are those you give it. If we had left out SSN, person wouldn't have a social security number. All right? So when you look in here, and like I said, we're going to take a break. Then we had this one. This was static, so this is going to be able to communicate with our main. All right? That's why I put that in there. Plus it's static, so it's going to be shared by all instances. All right. Then we had 3 different constructors. In the first constructor, we're passing in nothing. Nothing. But since we're creating a new person, we want to add 1 to our person count, and then we want to fill it up with their default names and the other 6 values with their default values. Does that make sense? Then we came up to our second person, and we said, hey, with that person, we know their name, their first name, we know their last name, we have created a person, so we want to add 1 to the count, but then we have to fill up everything else with defaults. All right? So we're going to do 2 things when we get back from the break. We're going to write the other constructor. All right? When we're going to fill up all that stuff, it won't be hard. But from there, we're going to assume that it's possible that the height we entered or the weight we entered were bad. So we're going to validate them. All right? Then when we get done with all that, we're going to go and overwrite the toString method. And if you go, I don't know what the hell the toString method is. The toString method is what gets called in C# when you do a write line. We want to take control over what gets called when we call a write line. That's what we're going to do. After we've gotten done with all of that stuff, then we're going to go back up to main, and we're going to create 6 people. And we'll print them out as soon as we create them, so you can see what they look like. Does that all make sense? Then when we get done with that, we're going to take this whole thing. If you look up on the screen, line 16 right now 16 all the way. Come on. We're going to create another project, and we're going to take these 100 or so lines. We're going to create another project, and then rather than just having a program here, we're going to right mouse click on here. We're going to create another class, and we're going to put those lines of code into their own class, because that's the way you typically do things. All right, and then that'll be it for today. So it's 9:07. Sorry, it's longer than usual. Let's come back, please, around 9:20.